This is the sound we hear when the woods come alive with whispers that shouldn't exist. Hello, I'm Alex, and I am on a quest to uncover all of the terrifying tales that lurk in the shadows of our world. And one of those tales pertains to camping, or as it's known in the horror community, voluntarily sleeping where the monsters live. It means the same thing, really. And of course, as a certified paranormal investigator, I've done my fair share of camping in supposedly haunted locations, right? Just off the top of my head, I've been to Burkittsville Forest, Camp Crystal Lake, and I think from that, I've stayed in quite a few tents. But when it comes to camping, whether you're just looking for a quick weekend getaway or something more adventurous, it is worth learning that not all woods are created equal. So I know what I am talking about when it comes to things that go bump in the night. And so, without further ado, let's metaphorically zip up our sleeping bags as I uncover the chilling phenomenon of campers hearing voices calling their names in the wilderness. When I was out there for the first time in the deep, dark forest, living the camping lifestyle on what was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, the first unsettling thing that I noticed is that the woods have a way of playing tricks on your mind. Alex, what do you mean by that? Well, here's how the human mind works in nature. We'll get into the psychology later. In the city, we're used to a constant barrage of noise, cars honking, people chatting, sirens wailing. But in the woods, it's quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, our brains start to fill in the gaps. In the forest, I don't know why my hand is still up there mimicking tree branches, but in the forest, it's a little bit different because that same silence that should be peaceful suddenly becomes oppressive. And this is usually when campers start to hear things. So the rustling of leaves becomes footsteps, the wind through the trees becomes whispers, and this is where it gets really creepy, you hear your name. And then you're left wondering, did I really hear that? Or am I losing my mind? And this is where those spine-chilling experiences really take shape. Or should I say sound? Because there is one key rule when it comes to camping. If you hear your name being called in the woods, don't answer. And the reason for this, as we all know, is that in folklore, spirits and otherworldly entities often try to lure unsuspecting victims by calling their names. But it's also because sound travels differently in forests. In fact, eerily so. A group of campers experiencing this phenomenon was where I first encountered the true terror of the woods. They were staying in a clearing about the size of this studio, which surprisingly, given that I am often dubbed America's foremost expert on things that shouldn't exist, is not that big. And at the best of times, I don't like being in close proximity to potentially supernatural phenomena. But being squashed in a tent with 4 terrified campers was the second most horrifying experience of my life. And I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Alex, what was the first? Being squashed in the car with them on the way to the campsite. But the next time we met to discuss their experience, we sure did have a nervous laugh. At least I think we did. I couldn't hear them because they were still whispering, afraid that whatever called their names might hear them. You see, forests, like haunted houses or abandoned asylums or America itself, are just more sinister at night. I mean, they'd have to be, right? Especially given what we've discovered on this channel about the differences in perception between day and night. And of course, nighttime is not the only time in a forest where you'd hear strange things. In addition to the night, the twilight hours, and in desperate times, the middle of the day, which should prompt nobody to ask me about the incident of the noonday demon in 1998, there is also the phenomenon known as the witching hour. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, Alex, the witching hour is between 3 and a.m. Well, firstly, that's not always true. And secondly, that's not where I was going with this. I was actually going to mention the psychological impact because while in daylight, our rational minds can explain away strange noises, this is often not the case in the dead of night. To go from logical thinking to primal fear, you often have to experience something truly inexplicable. There's one thing to remember. Hearing a twig snap, but hearing your name called out by an unseen entity when you're alone, it could lead to an unintentionally hilarious reaction video. In fact, I do have footage, but I can't show it on here because I get hundreds of complaints and an equal number of requests for exorcisms. So just take my word for it. Strange occurrences are of course found in many places and through much of our daily lives, but never more do I encounter them than when I'm in the woods. So because of this, it is worth remembering some of the key differences between rational explanations and paranormal phenomena. Don't take my word for it. Instead, listen to me from last year. It was once said by me in just a second from now that you can tell a lot about a person by how they react to unexplained phenomena. And given its unparalleled record of boasting larger-than-life ghost stories, America might fancy its chances of winning the My Ghost Stories scarier than your ghost story debate. But the truth is, and you might find this shocking, British ghost stories are often more subtle and chilling. You can't talk about voices in the woods without talking about pareidolia. Pareidolia is the tendency for the human mind to perceive familiar patterns or meanings in random stimuli. And the only reason I made that scientific explanation there was to draw your attention to the miniature face I see in the wood grain of this desk while I was bored. Anyway, there are several key differences in how this applies to our topic. In urban settings, pareidolia might make us see faces in inanimate objects or hear hidden messages in songs played backwards. But in the woods, it's a whole different ballgame. But whereas urban pareidolia is often harmless and even amusing, that's not always the case in the forest. Sure, seeing a face in a tree trunk might give you a chuckle during the day, but hearing your name called out in the dead of night, that's when things get really freaky. Due to the way sound travels in forests and how our minds process unfamiliar environments, there's also a difference in how we perceive these auditory hallucinations. In cities, background noise might mask or explain away strange sounds. But in the silence of the woods, every little noise is amplified, thus making it harder to dismiss as just your imagination. One of the biggest concerns for campers venturing into unfamiliar woods, aside from being forced to eat canned beans for days, is the great unknown that lurks in the darkness. In folklore, spirits are often said to mimic familiar voices to lure people away. Moreover, different cultures have various explanations for these phenomena, from Native American legends of skinwalkers to European tales of will-o'-the-wisps. What does all of this mean? Well, let's just say that if you want to go camping but are worried about hearing voices, you might want to run to the nearest outdoor store to pick up some noise-canceling headphones. These headphones will block out the eerie sounds of the forest. In the event that your headphones don't come with a built-in white noise generator, be sure to also download a white noise app. This app is magic. It allows you to turn the creepy sounds of nature into soothing ocean waves or gentle rainfall. For those brave souls who want to face their fears head-on, the same applies but in reverse. A high-quality audio recorder might also be needed to capture any unexplained voices. Both are widely available for ghost hunters and skeptics alike on Amazon. I'd say the most obvious difference between camping in familiar woods and venturing into unknown forests is the level of comfort. When I first stayed in an unfamiliar forest, I couldn't believe how on edge I was, and not in a "this is so exciting" type of way. I mean, this was a state park. I just mean it was unsettling. But in familiar camping grounds, you don't usually have that problem and/or luxury of genuine fear. Because a significant amount of popular camping sites are either not truly isolated or not isolated well. This is a particular problem when you are squished in a campground with dozens of other tents and RVs. As with many areas of life, camping has its own subgenre of rational versus paranormal explanations. Take, for instance, the phenomenon we're discussing, hearing one's name called in the woods. In scientific circles, this might be explained as an auditory hallucination brought on by sensory deprivation or heightened anxiety. This is the explanation we use for what paranormal investigators might call evidence of ghostly activity. Also, whether it's situated in a dense forest or an open clearing, scientists and paranormal enthusiasts can't agree on what causes these experiences. Upon entering this debate, we usually opt for the word pareidolia. Please note that skeptics, just like patrons on my most recent live stream, are divided on whether this should be pronounced pareidolia or pareidolia. Either way, believers will often call this phenomenon a sign of supernatural activity. More often than not, rational thinkers will call an unexplained voice a trick of the mind. Paranormal investigators will call a trick of the mind potential evidence. While scientists have about 100 words for auditory hallucinations, chief among these are auditory pareidolia, phantom voices, and audio matrixing. And finally, infrasound. This is something I've encountered far more in my investigations than I have in everyday life. This is a low-frequency sound that can cause feelings of unease and even hallucinations, but the use of infrasound might be confusing to some skeptics. You might think of infrasound, often pronounced infrasound, as a purely scientific phenomenon, a fine example of which is the low-frequency rumble produced by certain natural events that I somehow keep mentioning in my videos just by coincidence. That's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below some of the creepy camping experiences that you've encountered. I'm Alex Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at Lost in the Woods, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the algorithmic wilderness. Thank you to my patrons for literally making this video happen. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so today at Patreon.com Creepy Campfire Tales. Until the next video, sleep tight and don't let the forest spirits bite. Goodbye.